Our guest is here, the MP for Molo constituency, who has retained the chairmanship of the Finance Committee in the National Assembly. We saw some changes. He wasn't changed. That means that even his fellow committee members have some level of confidence in him. Kuria Kimani, good morning.
Good morning, Latif.
How are
welcome
you?
to this other side. I used to meet you on Mombasa, along Mombasa Road.
Yeah, now we are operating from CBD. Okay.
I like it, Fix Illumination. It's a very good show.
Good.
Thank you.
Keep it up.
Karibu sana. It's good to have you here.
Thank you.
And you know, we're going to have this conversation about the budget for 2025-26 and what we expect to see from your committee and the work of the committee that you'll be doing and the engagement with the people. But first, Janet is going to give you a quick quote of the day.
Right, quick quote as we even maybe try and use it to segue into the conversation. This is by Alice Walker, notably known as the author of a very well-known civil rights book and play called The Color Purple. And she said the most common way people give up their power is by thinking that they don't have any. The most common way people give up their power is by thinking that they don't have any. What are your reflections on that?
Amazing. I can't agree. First of all, good morning, to all the listeners listening this morning, and greetings from the great people of Molo constituency, all the way from Nakuru County. We bring blessings of rain. We are now in our planting season. We are anticipating that we'll have a very good year where we're going to continue playing our role in feeding the nation. We are one of our greatest food growing constituencies in the country. Having said that, you know, the budget making process, our constitution is very clear on the role of the public in a budget making process. But sometimes the reason why the public gives in to the power that you're talking about is because of their lack of understanding of the role they play and at point they play which role. And if you have to actively participate in any process, you have to know your place in that process. And the members of the public have two crucial things to do. First of all, understand the budget making process. Where do we start? Where do we go? You know, today brought the Constitution, Article 220 of our Constitution, talks about budget and spending. And it gives room to our legislative framework that sets out when do we do what. And that is contained in our PFM Act. And our PFM Act now talks about the budget making process. Where do we start? Where do we end? And I brought with me quick timelines. By around the 30th of August, we have what's called the budget circular. So the budget circular is actually contained in Section 35 of the PFM Act. And this is where the budget process starts. So when you're talking about the budget for 2025-2026, that will kick in from the 1st of July of 2025, the process actually started last year through what's called the budget circular. I thought you called BROP. The BROP is a budget review and outlook paper that is tabled by the 30th of September as per Section 26 of the PFM Act. This is a reflection of now the actual economic outcome of the previous year and comparing that to the present year and now suggesting how do we see the next budget looking like. So it's like a prediction of this is what to expect from the budget. By the 15th of February, we have what's called the budget policy statement. So the budget policy statement, commonly known as BPS, is contained in the PFM Act Section 25(2) that sets the ceilings. The ceilings means that in our next budget, this is going to be the ceiling for expenditures. This is how much you're going to spend on education, on health, on roads, on whichever, but just sets the keyword here is the ceilings. This process goes through public participation. So already by the time we are now here, we already have the ceilings on our expenditures. So we're talking about how much you need to spend on education, how much you need to spend on health, how much you need to spend on transport, how much you need to spend. We already have ceilings set already for that. This particular process goes through, first of all, being published by National Treasury, they published by the National Assembly, and actually public participation meetings that are carried on across the country, and that requires submission of remarks through whether it's email or whichever other forms that Parliament may prescribe. Article 2, according to the Article 2 of the Constitution, it now provides now for the next step what's called the Division of Revenue Bill. So Division of Revenue Bill describes how do we share revenue between the national government and the county governments. It is what we call the horizontal sharing. And that's why now you see the back and forth. That this, like this year, we are sending, say, 400 billion shillings to counties. No, counties say, no, we need 415. And then there's a back and forth about how do we share the revenue between national and county government. And that's called the Division of Revenue Bill. Then after we do the Division of Revenue Bill, we do what's called, in short, CARA. CARA is County Allocations Revenue Bill. That becomes an act. That's CARA. Now, after now it's passed by Parliament, becomes an act.
It's first CAB.
Yes, it's it's a CAB that become CARA. And this now has so Division of Revenue Bill has a vertical sharing. Now CARA has the horizontal sharing. And this is now what describes how much does each county get. And again, how much each county gets is again as a result of another process that's done by the Commission on Revenue Allocation that determines how do we decide what county gets what. And they have several weights: population, health, poverty index, own source revenue, how much they generate. We have insisted, or let me say, at the Committee of Finance and National Planning have actually insisted that we have physical discipline as one of the weights for the allocation of monies to counties. But again, the measurement of that is something that is not so scientific, so it will become a very huge subject of conversation. Then again, after that, by the 15th of February, once we have the budget policy statement, it's tabled at the same time with what's called the MTRS, medium-term debt management strategy. Higher, we have the ceilings. How are we going to fund them, Janet? And so we now have what's called the MTRS, that's medium-term revenues, medium-term debt management strategy that sets this is how much we anticipate to borrow domestically and externally, and this is how much we intend to raise in terms of ordinary revenue. Then after that, by the 30th of April, which is a few days from now, we have the budget estimates. So this is now, we had the ceilings that says this is how much you're going to spend on each sector. Now the estimate says how much do you spend on which votes. So when we talk about education sector, for example, we have basic education, we have primary education, we have JSS, we have senior secondary schools, we have university education. So now the budget estimates now gives us exactly how much are you spending on which vote. There's something very beautiful that our constitution did, the role of public participation. So when we do the budget estimates, the budget committee is required to go to 12 counties every year to seek the views of the public. 12? Yes.
At least 12.
At least 12. Yes. In fact, it has to be 12. And the essence of 12 is so that ideally within, at around 4 budget cycles, then the budget committee would have gone through the whole country. Because we have 47 counties, so 12 times 4 will be 48. So within 4 budget cycles, the budget committee will have gone through the whole country, seeking the views of the public, and this is our budget. Do you think these are our priorities? And this is in addition to the other views that are sent through email or conversation we have on TV and all that. That's the budget estimates. The budget estimates come at the same time with the finance bill, because we're saying that now we agree these are our ceilings. Yeah. Okay. Now we agree this is what should go to which vote. Then we ask ourselves, how do we raise money to finance this particular budget votes?
And that's April 30th.
By April 30th.
By April 30th. Okay. Later we'll confirm where people can access this information. We're having a conversation so that this budget process is clear to everyone. I just want to ask as we go into the conversation, the protests are still fresh from last year, the finance bill protest, and I wonder whether any of that informed thinking, planning, going into this year, or if there's anything that you learned from the protest, because that was the people speaking and the people speaking out.
Janet, some of us have very painful memories of that. Some of us took personal losses. My home was attacked. For many weeks, my family had to live out of our home. We had to stay in a hotel, and we were actually even chased out of that hotel at some point because we were a risk to the rest of those people. The unfortunate thing is what took people to the streets. Most of them even now do not know what took them to the streets. And I dare say that. Because the final product that was on the finance bill is what we will later pass in December through the tax procedures amendment bill, tax amendment bill, which everyone agrees, or most of the people agree that these were good proposals. But the misinformation, the propaganda, and all the misinformation that we had is still a very painful process. Having said that, we're going to have to do the budget process again, because leadership is about providing leadership. And unfortunately, or fortunately, some of us have the privilege of having to do that yet again, leading the country in saying, what are our priorities and how do we make sure that your priorities are done right? And hopefully this time around, we anticipate, or we hope that we're going to carry as many Kenyans as we can on this particular process. One thing I'm very proud about, my grandmother is almost 100 years of age, and last year, and she's barely literate. Last year she asked me, why did you come up with this thing called finance bill? And I was telling her, I didn't come up with it. It has always been there. It is part of not just our constitution, but it is outlined in our PFM Act. But that my grandmother, knowing that there is a finance bill in this country, it is a great process in the right direction. But now can we start with, fine, there is something called the finance bill. What does it do? It finances the budget. Exactly, So what is this budget? What is this money going to? And what does this finance bill contain? And I hope, I took a lot of time to explain to as many Kenyans as I could, in as many media as I could, even people that, our numbers were shared, so my phone will ring endlessly. And I will take my lunch break every day to answer all the calls that come on my phone. And say, so reject this. I'm like, okay, what exactly are you rejecting? No, we do not want these additional taxes. What specific tax don't you want?
Any additional tax?
Yeah,
Let's
I think they made
break,
it clear though.
Let's take a break.
Perspective is interesting. I think the tax amendment laws were seen as a way of cleverly sneaking back in the things that were rejected in the finance bill, not as a great new bill. And it's so interesting from your perspective. It looks different. The fact that we've gone into like a budget cycle again without the lessons that were learned from the previous ones being fully taken in is, I think, a bit worrying.
It is that the Kikombe on YouTube, incorrect. The people knew why the streets were occupied. Parliament failed us by refusing to listen to the populace during public participation. So to Mariam's point perspective, but you've shared yours, but I think to say that people were misinformed might be undermining what the spirit of those protests were. And it was really, also it was an opportunity for civic education around the budget process to be amplified and known perhaps more than has been amplified in a very long time.
And just bring into perspective the lessons that were learned from it. And that's why you see the 4 bills that were passed in December all came with explainers. And I think I got in when Latif explaining that I dare also say that we failed in how we communicated on the budget making process. But then we all need to start from somewhere. And I've given an example of my illiterate grandmother now knowing there's something called a finance bill, and now taking back now that you know there's something called finance bill, when does it come? What does it contain? And what is the role of public participation? And how do you know that public participation is actually important in the process? And I think now, as we now start this new budget process, and I'm very happy that we have this discussion before these bills are tabled in Parliament. Now we have now a responsibility of not just educating, but the public will have a chance to understand this process long before it starts. Because one of the greatest challenges that we got in last year, and that's why we got to the protests, by the time people are running, there's something called the finance bill, it was at the tail end of the process.
Yep.
And they're saying, now we are being overtaxed without public participation. Whereas public participation had been conducted and concluded. But I don't know the conversations that we're having, and this is something that we're actually having as a National Assembly and as a committee of and the Departmental Committee of Finance and National Planning, is that the way public participation also have been carried out is so traditional, where we thought we did score very greatly is calling people for a town hall meeting at KICC. So the question is, how many people are willing to leave their workplaces to come to KICC and give their views? And perhaps we need to have a way of taking the feedback we get from our social media platforms as actually active public participation.
Yeah.
So that we are not saying that you need to write an email. There are very many people who rarely do emails. You're in a WhatsApp chat, even at your workplace. And so as we started this budget making process, we want to make that public participation much more involving the public, and especially recognizing that there are more ways of public participation that are more effective rather than calling people to a town hall. Okay. Although the town hall meeting is important.
Which you'll continue on this point, and I think that's was the basis of Janet's question. What lessons did Parliament learn from last year? Have we seen any of those lessons being applied this year? Kuria Kimani is the MP for Molo. He is the chair of the Finance Committee of the National Assembly. He's here, so we talk about our budget making process for this year. The finance bill for 2025 will be coming to him by the end of this month, and we'll start engaging again like we did last year. We'll be back shortly. Keep it here.
So my name is CP Kuria Kimani. I'm the Member of Parliament for the Great People of Molo constituency and the Chairperson Departmental Committee of Finance and National Planning. I want to make sure that this budget cycle this time around, we carry as many Kenyans along as we can. We do a lot of public participation, we do a lot of civic education, and make sure that the views of Kenyans are not just heard, but they're seen to be heard in the process. Let's fix this nation.
Lovely.
Thank
you.
On 30th, when you receive the bill,
right,
it will be the pleasure for that day. So MP has taken us through, just reminded us, the budget making cycle. It begins all the way from August, when we say, okay, so now the budget circular is out. We have started the process. Many meetings, September 30th. We have a report that comes in and looks at review of the implementation of the previous budget and the anticipated implementation going forward. We have another crucial date, the February the 15th, by when the National Treasury should go to Parliament with something called the budget policy statement. We've been discussing it on this show. And also going there with the medium-term debt management strategy and saying this is what our debt is looking like projected going forward. Parliament must approve for the National Treasury to go to the next step. If Parliament says we don't agree, then Kizungumkuti enters. Now, Parliament has been discussing the BPS and the MTRS, and they have given a nod to this. And with this, now we are going into all those conversations about the division of revenue, the county allocation of revenue based on the CRA formula, and so on and so forth. But by the end of this month, April 30th, the National Treasury should take to Parliament what is the budget estimates. Now that is how much money will be spent on each item. Okay, so Parliament has approved, we are going to have 3 trillion shillings, 300 billion shillings going into roads, or 825 billion shillings going into education. Now, the estimates is in education, exactly how much is going into school feeding, exactly how much is going into capitation, exactly how much is going into so on and so forth, including teachers, right?
Yep.
And then the finance bill will also go to Parliament. And the finance bill is where we are saying what? How we raise money.
Yes.
Okay. I know you have a question.
I have many questions, but I just want to jump back to what you said right before the break. It was speaking to the lessons learned since the last one and taking social media feedback, for example, as actual public participation. Do you think that previously what we have been doing as public participation has been sufficient?
First of all, public participation has been a new concept in our constitution. And despite it being provided for in the Constitution, many years down the line, we still don't have a real legal framework in terms of an act, in terms of a piece of law that defines what is this public participation is about. So we rely on the court interpretations of what sufficient public participation is and what public participation means. And again, the complexity of the public participation is if there's a proposal for a particular matter and there are 4 people that support it and 6 that don't, does it mean that you should take the vote of the 4 that agree and the 6 and now reject the 6 as opposed to the 6 that don't? Or how, in terms of the semantics and the mathematics of it, it's quite a more complicated process, because for whatever way that you're talking about, let's say for example we want to dual. There's a proposal to dual the Rironi Mosamit road.
Yep.
It's very critical to us that use that road, and therefore, if you carry when you carry public participation, because that process, it being a PPP project, will have to go through public participation. People will be asked, should we do this dueling? And most likely, the people that use that route, watu wa Naivasha, Gilgil, sisi watu wa Molo, the Mosamit, tutasema we want the road. If that road is going to come through alone, for example, it's going to be paid by the rest of the country. So what will be the person from Mombasa or person from Garissa or someone from Nyeri or someone from Nairobi who does not necessarily want to use that road speak about the addition of either a tax burden or a loan burden to them to build a road that goes to Rironi? So that is the complexity of public participation, because there are people that will say, we want the road, we don't mind the additional taxation, we don't mind the additional loan, because we want the service.
We can see the direct benefit.
Yes, we can see the direct benefits. But people that do not necessarily benefit from that particular project will most likely say, no, I don't want that road.
Yep.
I don't want additional taxation, I don't want additional loan on me, because that road does not lead to my place. Unless this road leads to my Mahiu, because my interest is in my Mahiu. So that is a complexity of public participation. However, from what the courts have interpreted and from global best practice, the first answer is, can we have a debate about it? And the good thing with opening a debate about a particular discussion means that people will be aware that in the event that the majority of the voices, and the majority of the voices, because even after now, the public voices, let us remember that our constitution mandates the people's representative to make decisions on behalf of the people of Kenya. So, and until that time, when you change the representatives of the people, then the decisions made by the National Assembly has the majority takes it. So the fact that we have a discussion about it, so at least I know there's going to be a road, it's going to cost me this much, and the way we're going to raise this money is through either this additional taxation or this particular loan. And I think that is a great step on public participation.
Okay,
now, the next stage is, how do we make it count, and how do we balance between the person who wants and the person that doesn't want it?
Here's the thing, that even since June last year, when we did not have a legal framework, and you saw what happened, about the arguments on the quality of public participation, even since then in courts, we still don't have a legal framework today. So the AG's office have been drafting, a policy around it. It still hasn't come through. How are you going to do public participation this year? That'll be different. And just going back into what Mariam was asking, so last year there was public participation that people felt was not adequate and sufficient. You didn't take in my views, or you didn't tell me why you rejected my views. This time, how different is it going to be?
One thing I must, I'll give myself credit for, and the Committee of Finance and National Planning, is that one of the reasons why we have such great debates on the finance bill, and people think it's an invention of President William Ruto or an invention of Kuria Kimani, is that we actually took it seriously to engage members of the public. And that's how that this became a great conversation. And we also and we also appreciate now the role of technology, because before people would be glued on their TV to see what the budget is, but now, long before the CS for National Treasury comes and releases the budget, we have much faster ways of communicating what's happening, whether it's through X or Instagram or TikTok or all these other platforms. And I think just like every institution is trying to keep up with the new models of communicating, including Nation Media Group. I like what you're telling people. Now take a video of yourself saying how you're fixing the nation and send it to us. That wasn't there a few years ago. But now, courtesy to the new developments in technology, that's how now Parliament and National Assembly and the Committee of Finance and National Planning intends to make sure that this time around, even our public participation will employ more technology-driven views from members of public and technology-driven explanation to what this is. And we have also put a notice to National Treasury, and we told them, when you're publishing this, publish them with an explainer. Tell us, what are you doing? Because the complexities of lawmaking, and this is not just for Kenyan lawmaking, but it's global. You'll find that if you read a particular law, it will go, say, we want to amend, the proposal is to delete section 22C of the PFM Act. So you have to go to the PFM Act and see what that deletion means. More related to tax laws, the introduction of VAT on fuel in 2022 was a deletion of a deletion. So on the bill, it was to delete section this of the VAT Act.
Yeah. And
when you go to the VAT Act, VAT was saying that section this be deleted. So you have to go and check what was that being deleted, and the complexity with this is that it's somehow almost so complex that even some legislators do not necessarily understand what this particular element is saying. And that's what now we have put notice in National Treasury, and we're very happy because they have actually done that. Is every time we have this budget process, whether it's the finance bill or the budget, publish an explainer. English and Swahili.
So that people
when it comes to
understand.
National Assembly, also when you're doing public participation, we publish an explainer. When we went for public participation meetings for the purpose of law that we passed in December, we will have a whole 2-hour session before public participation to explain to them what are these laws about. And we intend to do this again. And fast forward, I'm checking the headlines today for Business Daily. It's a subject I love that I've been following up since I became a member of Parliament in 2017, about virtual assets, cryptocurrencies and bitcoins and blockchain technology. And National Treasury has at last published a bill. We're going for it for second reading. Is it today? It's actually coming for second reading today.
Okay, can we pause you there just so that we can come back to this? We can come to some of those other conversations. I'm cognizant that there's so much to pack in a short amount of time. There's some questions that we'd like to ask around, why the National Assembly passed laws only to reverse them less than 3 months in. But I also want to take just what people are saying online. I'll just throw them out there and we'll see if we can come back to them before the end of this interview. Somebody here is asking, Yusuf, almost alluding to what you just said, why is there so much opaqueness around the borrowing bit of the budget? Up to date, the audit of the National Assembly hasn't been done. Do we even have to go in this direction? I can see you taking notes.
So the national debt.
Sorry, yeah, national, yes. Let me see that. Yes, national debt. Thanks for that. Somebody else here is saying, what were the changes in those bills passed in December? What was good in them and that they were passed? Let me see if I can pick 1 or 2 more. There are so many. We'll see if we can go through. Priorities is the issue. How much was spent? Somebody's saying part of the tours should have included information on the budget process. So that's just somebody expressing. Are they willing to listen? Tukisema reject, what a reject. That's what somebody else is expressing. So yeah, just people kind of airing those. So you can...
I'd like to pick up from Mariam. That one. Just from I know you've said the complexities of, yes, I can look at a finance bill or a specific clause, and because it suits me or my area, I say yes, and someone else says no. But what wakisema reject, mta reject this year?
Wow. What wakisema reject? Interesting. Let me start by answering the question that was asked about what was good in the bill that we passed in December. a part of lawmaking process or taxation measures are used to, for example, grow local manufacturing, ease the burden of living, reduce the cost of living. You'll notice, for example, what the tax procedures amendment bill did was to extend the tax amnesty for all penalties and interest when you pay principal tax. That was actually contained in the finance bill, which we said, fine, reject all, fine. So some of these amendments that you see, when you say reject all, for example, there are people that were waiting for us to pass that so that they will be forgiven because they were on this quote-unquote CRB of KRA. They had outstanding interest and penalties that they were looking forward to. Can we have this amendment, this amnesty extended so that I can now become tax compliant, which is a great thing. And then someone else says, no, we don't care what is good or not, reject all. And that's why I'm encouraging a conversation about, can we look at the process and say, this is what I don't like about this particular law. Because it cannot be that the whole law is wrong in its entirety. And remember also, Article 114 of the Constitution mandates a parliament to make sure that the laws that we pass and the budget that we pass has to be sufficiently funded. So my encouragement is, as we look at the revenue side, can we also critically analyze the expenditure side and say, this I don't think that this is a priority to us. And you found one of the great outcomes of the protest was a scrutiny on the expenditure side, where people said, we do not want these offices.
Just before we go into expenditure, just to remind you how we got to reject the whole bill. It didn't start out as Reject Finance Bill 2024. It started as you're taxing pads. Why are you taxing pads? And then it's like, okay, do we understand why you're and then, okay, there's VAT on this, there's this and that. It started as specific clauses. And when that didn't happen, people were like, you know what, Fagia Yote, reject the whole finance bill. Yeah. That's how we got there, right?
Yes, and the discussion about, and it's a good thing you brought up the discussion about the tax on pads, for example.
Well, I don't want to go granular because now that is a bygone. But the idea is, will we listen this time around when people say reject clause X, reject clause Y, or reject the whole thing?
I was actually saying that when they said we don't care whether our sanitary towels or pads are locally manufactured or not, we don't want to hear anything that could increase the cost of whether, let me have a choice of whether I want to do locally manufactured or imported. We don't want to hear any taxation on these particular items. And you know what? The finance bill that was passed by the National Assembly actually listened to that, and those clauses were deleted. And this is a fact. So, and then now, but the point is, by the time now we were telling them that these particular proposals were deleted, they are no longer on the bill, I think there was a trust deficit between the government and the public then. They were saying, I don't think so. Why are they still there on the bill? And now, that was also a result of lack of sufficient civic education. Yes, they're not on the bill because that is a proposal. They will be in the act. That deletion will sit in the act.
It has to go through Parliament for that to happen.
Let's go to Parliament for that to happen. And I'm really hoping that this time around, we will carry the public in ensuring them that the views they have will count.
This is why we have you here today.
Yes.
To check whether you listened to what people said last year and the lessons that you've learned from last year and how you want to do things different this year. But Kuria Kimani is the MP for Molo. He's our guest. He's going to stay here with us for a couple more minutes as we go into the news at top of the hour. It's coming up to 2 minutes to 8 a.m. Fixing the nation, one conversation at a time. Keep it here. So our conversation continues with the chair of the Finance Committee in the National Assembly, Kuria Kimani. 30th of April, he is expecting to receive the finance bill from the National Treasury. So budget is expenditure plus revenues, right?
Yep.
Already, the National Assembly has given the ceilings for both, especially for the expenditures. This is how much we expect you do not usipitishe hapa. Don't spend more than this. But also it's based on the National Assembly looking at how much you were able to raise last year, how well you spent the money that you raised last year, and how well you've done with that finance. Do we expect to raise more taxes this year, Kuria?
It's a difficult conversation to have.
Okay, let me start with this. Has Parliament approved a higher ceiling expenditure from what was there last year?
Certainly, yes. However, there are three sources of income to finance the expenditure side. There is tax measures. And remember, they're already existing tax measures.
Yeah.
So the question that we'll be asking is, are the current tax measures sufficient to finance the increment in expenditure side? Another source of income for expenditure side is what's called appropriations and aid.
Yeah.
We've seen a big jump, a big growth in our appropriations aid. Appropriations aid is income generated when government charges you for particular services. Like when you apply for a passport, or you visit a game park, or so that's what's called A&M.
Yes.
You've seen sufficient growth in A&M. We'll be watching on the space on donor-funded projects because how much now have we received in terms of donations? So first of all, National Treasury now has data on all that information, and we won't have that data until towards the last quarter, and that's why the date of 30th April is very important. It is to say now, this is how much we have raised in A&A, this is how we anticipate to raise next financial year, this is how much we generated already in terms of ordinary revenue now, this is how much commitment you have in terms of donor funding now. And so the question is that sufficient to finance the budget? In the event that that is not sufficient, that's when there will be additional tax measures to now raise the additional revenue to finance that particular budget. But in the event that there's empirical evidence to show that the already existing tax measures, the appropriations in aid raised, and the donor commitments that we have is sufficient to finance the ceilings, then there will not be a need for a finance bill. But in the event that then that is, and remember, one of the challenges that we get, and I'm really looking forward to having as a robust conversation as we have. I think I was telling Mariam here earlier, I was checking reject finance between 2025 is trending on number 6 on X.
Yeah.
Then I'm like, okay, I think you should talk about then the budget. As in, it's not just a finance bill; it's a budget. If we are able to find non-priority areas in the budget that need to cut expenditures on, then we will not need to have additional tax measures.
Okay.
As it stands, KRA has seen increased revenue collections over the last 2 quarters, but still fallen short of their targets. That tells you that already there's a shortfall, and there's likely to be one in the next year. So is it just safe to say there will be additional tax measures?
I think so. And also especially because, the discussions we have when the budget committee is conducting public participation on the budget, at the same time the finance committee is conducting public participation on the finance bill. The two meetings are like heaven. As in the difference is like heaven and hell. The budget committee discussions are about we want more money for our roads. We want additional money for health. We want additional money for, we want more dams. We want more roads. We want more, including even the state departments. We allocated this, but we want more. The finance committee on the other side is that do not raise any additional taxes. We do not want to, we have a tax, we don't need more. Then like, how do you marry the two?
Yeah.
Where public participation on one side is saying, we want these additional expenditures. Then on this other side, the same public, they come from the meeting on saying how much they want additional teachers to be enrolled. Then they come to us and they say, but usiongezee kitu.
So cut somewhere.
Unataka kuongezea kule, lakini hapa hautaki kuongeza.
Cut excess fat. And people have already said this. Cut excess fat. Why are you adding more money, for example, to Parliament, 5 billion shillings just in the supplementary budget? Why are you putting more supplementary budget into State House to fuel vehicles and so on and so forth? Cut excess fat, Mheshimiwa. Let's hear from David. David is calling in from Roysambu. Good morning, Fixer. David?
Hello, this is David. Yeah, and I'm calling from
Phil, is
Roysambu.
David still on the line?
Maybe.
Yes. I want to ask Mheshimiwa some questions.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, and in regards to the cost of life and life generally. Yeah, so Mheshimiwa, as you have seen right now, as we are speaking, SHA is not working. And as people who are working, you realize that we are being deducted. And due to that, you realize that our pay slip is being slashed due to the revenue. And also, as you see, the cost of unga, there was a time there was a speculation that unga will go down and it will be like 100 shillings per 2 packets. And now, as you have seen, unga is really an issue in the country. The life things are not easy, as you can see, even in the transportation sector. And for a common mwananchi, for at least to once we say that life has become easy, is we are talking about unga, the cost of transportation, and also the medication. So what are you doing? At least, people rejected the finance bill. And what are you doing now, you as who is in the center of mitigating all this, at least to make sure that mwananchi is at least affording the life that he's living at this moment?
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
It's a great question. Yeah.
Probably the question that's most top of mind for many.
Yeah, on the matter of SHA, it is a new product, it's a new project, and it has had its challenges. But one of the challenges I've seen mainly from some people, the ones I've interacted with, is them commenting about SHA not working, whereas they're not registered on the SHA platform. And I have specific examples of people I've met in my constituency. When we're doing bursary applications in my constituency, we actually brought the entire Huduma services across the entire constituency. And we took like direct feedback. People telling us, no, SHA is not working. I'm like, but are you on SHA? No, I'm not registered. And I think that's challenge number one. Challenge number two is that there was the limitation on the capitation of how much would be paid for what service. And I think I saw the communique by the new CS for health saying that has been improved. My niece was diagnosed with brain tumor in December last year. And I told my cousin, have you registered on SHA? And she said, no. So I said, can you register? And then we helped her through the process. She went to Kenyatta National Hospital. I did not do any intervention. So I'm not saying that she got this treatment because she's my niece. I did not call anybody. I did not take her, I did not do intervention. Her bill came to 587,000 shillings, and the entire amount was paid by SHA. So what we need to identify is what are these gaps that are not being covered by SHA, and how do we build, how do we bridge them? I know that several patients are being turned down by hospitals because they are owed money by NHIF. So some of these private hospitals feel that if already we have an outstanding payment, pending bill by NHIF, why should I take an additional payment? And I think that is something that again being addressed because we saw that. On the issue of unga.
The thrust of the question by David is the cost of living versus reduced incomes and the fear of a raid on the incomes again.
Yes. Part of what we did in the tax amendment bills of December was to make the rates on the payslip, what we call the statutory deductions, to be tax allowable for pay as you earn. It had a little saving on our payslips, But I agree that we need to do more. And once we fix the other systems to make sure they work, then the disposable incomes that we get from our payslips would be sufficient to earn us a living. But the problem is, when I have my disposable income, my take home less, and because I have paid for medical insurance, and when that medical insurance again does not work,
yes,
it makes me to go back to the pocket. And I'm really saying that the strategies being put in place will make it sufficient for us to make sure that I may not need to have an additional medical insurance, because already the contribution I'm making for the universal health coverage program is sufficient for my health. So that way, I will not feel the pain of my payslip. But until that time, and that's why I'm really hoping that all the stakeholders involved, including and especially the Ministry of Health, will put in place measures by the midnight hold to make sure that this universal health coverage works. Because when I don't have to send money to my sick mom or to my sick uncle or to my sick aunt, then my disposable income will be sufficient.
More money in your pocket. We have another call on the line. I think it's the same. It's a whole issue of I do not want to continue spending so much, and then I'm still giving the government X. Marvin from Kisumu, good morning.
Yes, good morning, Fixers.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Go ahead, Marvin, ask your question.
My name is Marvin from Kisumu, Kiboswa.
Yes.
And I'm so glad that you've given me a chance to speak on the show.
Karibu.
And I'm happy that you brought Mheshimiwa to the show so that he can write to us about our taxes. But you know, even when we talk about these taxes, yet the problem is the leaders that we are having. The leaders are full of corruption, incompetency.
Go on, Marvin.
Hello, are you getting me?
Yes, we're hearing you.
So even if we talk about these taxes, and even if they take more from us, there's nothing which they're going to do. The government is failing.
Thank
That's
you,
what
Marvin.
they should know.
Thank you, Marvin.
Thank you very much, and have a good day.
Have a good day too.
Thanks, Marvin.
Expenditure and leakages in expenditure.
It would be nice if the money left your pay slip for Shift Shah, and then everybody universally said it's working for me. I have been paying and it's working for me. But it only seems it's when like there's a few cases of it works and it works well, but for the rest, no. And that's across the board in every other thing. The money is being taken, but what is it doing for me?
And that was the spirit of Reject Finance. It wasn't that we don't want to be taxed. It's what will the tax come back and work for me? And even as you answer, Felix says the same thing. Accountability first. Curb corruption at all levels. And then we'll see a bill that works.
Let's talk about corruption. Do we really hate corruption? Or do you or do we only hate it if we're not beneficiaries of corruption? I spoke at the ISPA conference last year, and I told them, all of you seated here, some of the people were logging in from Nairobi, but had checked in Mombasa. And these are accountants, they're professionals. So I think the question about corruption in our government systems isn't just about leaders. It's about the core values in our societies. I get calls every time. And I get into discussions, and after that people ask me, Mheshimiwa nataka tenda. Mimi nataka unisaidie na job kwa gava.
I want to pause you there.
So
let
me finish, Eric.
I hear you.
It's about Eric.
I know you're saying it's a society issue.
It's a society issue.
Yes, it is a society issue. But the society does not steal its own taxes.
Yeah.
Okay? Those who are stealing our taxes are few, and they're the leaders.
Yes.
How does Parliament ensure that the 4.2 trillion shillings that you've approved as a ceiling for expenditure is not stolen, is not spent on paying somebody 10 billion shillings or 2 billion shillings or whatever amount it was that they were discussing?
I dare say that we have also laxed as a National Assembly and as a Senate in terms of how well we oversight our executive and our counties in our expenditures. And it's also because of the bureaucracies involved and the law reforms that needs to be done. Last week, we discussed the audit reports by the Office of the Auditor General, by the Public Accounts Committee. For which year? 21-22 financial year. So we are 3-4 years lagging behind in terms of discussing audit reports by the Office of the Auditor General. Even if we discuss them, and even if we debate them, and I'm saying this because I served in the Public Accounts Committee in last Parliament, the recommendations that are made by the Office of the Auditor General in every year, the following year they say, as per my previous year's observations.
Yep.
And so there is need for an overhaul of the entire audit system in government. But we're making good progress. I did sponsor a bill that was, one of the bills that was passed in this Panzanos at the Senate was, for example, making improprieties or failure to do particular actions that are recommended by the Auditor General a personal responsibility of the accounting officer. Mm-hmm. Because when you say that 10 billion shillings have been stolen at the Ministry of, say, Agriculture, just to give an example, there is a particular officers who erred in either omission or commission to make that happen. We do not have a piece of law that would put it a personal responsibility to that particular officer. So one of the pieces of law that I sponsored, that we have passed, is making it a personal responsibility. Number two, in the Public Audit Act, it's actually a bill that has been passed into an act yet, but we went through that reading. It's going to be assigned to the President in the next few weeks, is now to make it mandatory that the recommendations made by the Office of the Auditor General must be followed. And the person who does not follow those particular recommendations is held accountable and personally accountable. So that if the Office of the Auditor General says that there is this particular internal control measures that you do not put in place and need to put in place, and you don't put in place as Janet, now it is Janet now who becomes personally liable. But what we've had for a very long time is just saying, this money has been stolen. But when you go, the CS says, no, I'm not the accounting officer. The PS says, no, I was made to believe this because of the procurement officer. The procurement officer says, I raised these concerns, but they were overturned by the finance officer. So all this back and forth and bureaucracies around government, because unlike a private institution, I'm certain that here at Royal Media, if you pick a camera here,
this is National Media Group.
Sorry, in National Media Group, when you pick a camera here and you live with it,
of course. But in government,
think about it in government. It has a kulizana, so who's responsible is it to make sure the camera was there? Why was the place not locked? Who was supposed to be involved? Who saw the person living with it? So there is a whole bureaucracy involved. And also, to also make sure government works. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It's also to make sure that someone does not just claim that you stole when you didn't steal. So we are, and I dare say, as a chairman of the National Finance Committee, we have looked at these gaps and we have provided legislative framework on how to do them. The discussion I saw yesterday with this guy who was saying there's a deficit between the knowledge gap of him and the electorates.
Yeah.
And he was raising some very valid points. That also, as the electorates, you have the responsibility of making sure that the leaders that you elect are made accountable. And we'll have that chance again. So, but then we don't have to wait until then. I'm saying, as an individual, I'm doing my role. I have looked at what the gaps are that exist in law. I have convinced National Assembly to pass those particular legislations. They have been passed, and we'll continue to enhance them until we make sure that taxpayers' money give value for money.
Right.
That once we fix and make systems work, we will not mind paying additional taxes because we know for sure it's being spent on the correct purposes.
The way we operate with our bills and acts is this. Last year we spent this year we're looking to spend this much more. So it wants a zero-based budgeting. Let's start afresh.
Yes, and actually we must give this credit to His Excellency the President and the Cabinet. There is actually a Cabinet paper that actually approved as moving from incremental budget to zero-based budget. So it's now a requirement that budget yetu lazima tunaanza zero. Tulizana tuko na wafanyakazi wangapi? How much is your salaries? How much is your leave allowance? How much is this? How much is your training expenses? How much is on transport? How much is this? But again, the other problem is the size.
That will be implemented with this budget?
Yes.
So we are starting zero-based.
The budget policy statement and the estimates will be based on a zero-based budget.
Okay.
Even more interestingly, we passed amendment to the Public Finance Management Act that provided for migration from cash to accrual accounting. Let me tell you how this works. So we have been behaving as a country like at the end of the financial year is like the end of the world. It's like the government is closing up. So we've seen a lot of hashed expenditures at the end of the financial year. Because if you don't absorb the amount of money that we allocated for that financial year, quote unquote, inarudishwa. So pale mwisho wa mwaka kila mtu anangangana to make sure. So now with migration to accrual accounting, then that concern will be dropped. So that budget will have to it will also
next year.
Yes, the unpaid bills roll over to them, because now if a particular expense is not paid at the end of the financial year, you'll have to appropriate additional budget extra money in the following year for you to pay for an expense that was incurred the following year. So naturally what these guys will do, what these accounting officers will do, is that they will either not allocate that money so that huyu mwenye alifanya your services aogele, and then so that they can negotiate a new one. But that's no longer have to be there. It's also going to give us a proper accounting of our pending bills. We have so many people out here who are being auctioned because they supply services to government that were never paid. Now, that's accrual account will also mean that there is a proper, it's like in stock, when we're doing stock, we say FIFO, fast in, fast out. That the first expenditure to be expended, the first that gets to be paid. And that, I believe, will give back liquidity to the market and will reduce the budget corruption that happens, especially at the tail end of a financial year.
So as we gear up to 30th, to when you're expecting now to receive the finance bill, okay? So
And the budget.
and the expenditures. Speak to the nation now and tell us, how do we engage with you?
Oh, yes.
How do we get to read this? How do we get the Mwananchi version of it? How do we get to engage on it? And how do we give you feedback? So we can, when we come and tell you hatutaki hii, we can be sure that you've heard us.
Thank you very much. As we get towards the next budget cycle, we anticipate that according to the PFM Act, the budget estimates and or the finance bill will be tabled at the floor of the House by the 30th of April. After that, the two bills will go through first reading and will go through the process of public participation. The budget expenditure side, what money goes to what vote, would undergo public participation in 12 counties across the country. I encourage all Kenyans that when this process starts, please go to those particular meetings. We also understand that with the changes in technology and with our busy work life, we may not find time to physically appear for these particular conversations. We'll be providing easier ways of communication, not just through the traditional email address or the letters that we're asking you to write to the National Assembly, but this time around we will be providing WhatsApp numbers and we'll be monitoring the conversation we have on social media. We have encouraging you, please get informed. When you're saying reject, go to the bill and find out what specific clause do you find offensive and how could we even make it better. Because the essence of this particular piece of legislature should not be to punish anyone. They're supposed to ease our cost of living, to support local manufacturing, to make sure that we reduce our cost of living, to increase efficiency, to make sure that money is allocated for the correct purposes in this particular country. And I believe that if we get the budget process correct and we carry as many of us as possible in the budget process with the right information, we're going to have a great republic called Kenya.
Thank you very much, Mheshimiwa Kuria Kimani, MP for Molo and Chair of the Departmental Committee on Finance in the National Assembly, has been our guest from 7 a.m. We've been talking about the anticipated finance bill and what to expect different this year. Remember, every Tuesday on Fixing the Nation, we have budget conversations until the 30th of June. And then from there, we'll now talk about other things. But now, we are dedicating ourselves to making sure that we understand the budget as much as possible. Of course, after 30th, we'll now be getting granular and looking at the expenditure and also looking at the finance bill and any measures that have been proposed there. Keep it here for more. It's 8:30. We'll be back shortly with Miss Me With That.